Hey, we're here at Metropolis Cycles in Portland, Oregon to show you how to install the PDW 20-inch full e-bike fender set. We strongly recommend you have a bicycle shop install these for you, but if you're a confident mechanic, this video will guide you through the installation process. The first thing you're going to do is remove any accessories from the bike that might get in the way. If you're curious about this basket and bag, this is the Timber to Town zigzag basket and the large loot bag, both made by Portland Design Works. Now we're going to remove the front wheel. This particular bike uses a through axle, so you need a 5mm Allen wrench to remove that axle and pop the wheel off. This bike has a rear hub motor, so there's a cable that needs to be disconnected by pulling the two connectors apart before removing the rear wheel. On this bike, you also need to remove the rear derailleur before removing the rear wheel. The derailleur can be removed with a 5mm Allen wrench. Now, pull the dust cover off of the axle nut and use an 18mm wrench or adjustable wrench to loosen the nuts on both sides. That should be the last thing you need to do in order to get the rear wheel off. Front fork designs vary a lot on e-bikes. This one has a really thick fork crown. You could potentially run a super long bolt from the front all the way through to the back, but I'd suggest doing what we did here and just push a shorter 30mm long bolt up into the fork crown and out the back. Now you're able to hang the front fender onto that bolt and loosely thread a washer and nut on. If you have a nice long 4mm Allen wrench, you can poke it through the front fork crown hole to easily hold the bolt in place while you tighten up the nut. Alright, I'm going to come clean here. We forgot to film the part where you bolt the front stay tabs to your fork eyelets with a 4mm Allen wrench, but that's what you need to do. Now you can pop that front wheel back on, just doing the reverse of what you did to take it off. Once that's all done, use a 3mm Allen wrench to loosen the bolts that grab the stays so that you can position the fender in such a way that it doesn't rub on the tire. Once you have the fender where you want it, tighten those bolts back down until they're snug. Now you can give your wheel a spin and listen for any rubbing, adjust as necessary, and you're good to go. Okay, let's pause for 10 seconds before we start in on the rear wheel and just preview how good these are going to look on your bike when you're all done. Alright, brakes over. Onto the rear fender. You can see the eyelet on this bike is really close to where the frame protrudes out a bit. So we're going to use one of the included alloy spacers to space the stay tabs out away from the frame. You can see the bolt goes through a washer, then the two stay tabs, then the spacer, and then you thread it into the eyelet. You'll just need this bolt hand tight for now. Now you'll do the same thing on the other side. You're just going to space the stay tabs out from the eyelet to get around the frame and get that bolt hand tight. Okay, now we mount the front of the rear fender. On a lot of bikes, you'll need some spacers between this eyelet and the fender to bring the fender closer to the rear tire, but on this bike, no spacers are needed. Make sure to use a washer and also a bolt that has a low profile head that won't rub on your tire. As you do the final tightening, hold the fender so that it's centered on the frame. Okay, now put your rear wheel back in by doing all of the steps that we talked about earlier in reverse. Now it's time to tighten up the bolts that go into the frame eyelets with a 4mm Allen wrench on both sides. Getting them snug is good. No reason to crank them down with all of your might or anything. They've got those split washers that'll keep them tight for you. Using a 3mm Allen wrench, loosen up all 4 of the bolts that hold the stays. Now we'll be able to move the fender around and position it so it isn't rubbing on the tire. A lot of times it's easiest just to hold the fender where you would like it and tighten all 4 bolts while you're holding it in place. Finally, you're going to spin that wheel and make sure there's no rubbing. If you just finished installing your fenders, then congratulations to you. If you just watched this and decided to have a bike shop do the install, that's great too. Enjoy the spray-free rides.